I woke up September 9th thinking the length of a generation mentioned in Matthew 1 must not be the generation in chapter 24, since the maximum length of the generation as described in Matthew 1 has passed this week. I kept turning it over in my mind. Why did Jesus mention the length of a generation if it's not significant? Why bother telling us in Matthew 24 that once the fig tree puts forth leaves in spring, that generation will not pass before the Son of Man appears and the stars fall if we're not given the length of that generation? Then it hit me. Right after Jesus said that, he added that no one knows the day or the hour. I couldn't believe I missed the point of this again. He was saying that although the length of one generation in the book of Matthew is a maximum of 67.21 years, which would translate to 67 years and 0.21 of the 68th year, he told us not to calculate the 0.21 down to the day or the hour, but instead a general month or season. In the fig tree riddle, we're told 4 things. The fig tree will sprout forth leaves. This will occur in the spring when summer is nigh. Within one generation after that event, everything in Matthew 24 verses 1 through 31 will have already occurred. We know the fig tree represents the fathers of Israel. We're told that in Hosea 9:10. So this is telling us Israel will put forth leaves in the springtime, and within one generation after that event, all the things Jesus mentioned in Matthew 24 verses 1 through 31 will have already occurred. In a previous video, we examined all the things listed in Matthew 24 verses 1 through 31. Most Christians would probably agree that some of these things have already occurred, but verse 15 is where they would stop. Most believe the abomination of desolation has not yet stood in the holy place and the tribulation has not started. This is also what I believed until I followed the instructions in Matthew 24 precisely. Jesus told us the abomination of desolation he refers to is the one Daniel spoke of, and he said whoever reads it will understand. The book of Daniel does tell us exactly what the abomination of desolation was and when it was placed. However, it's not an easy read because the whole book of Daniel was written in code. It's impossible to know the truth about the abomination of desolation without understanding the book of Daniel, including the timeline given in chapter 11. After we followed the instructions to read the book of Daniel, including understanding the events in chapter 11, we found that the abomination of desolation occurred in 685 CE, 1290 years after the first Babylon siege. Jesus said in verse 21, once we see the abomination of desolation, the tribulation will occur. But in verse 29, he clarifies that the tribulation he's referring to is the tribulation of the days. We know from our examination of Daniel and Revelation that the days refer to the 1260 days, which also represent years. Jesus was telling us that after the Dome of the Rock is set up, the woman representing those in Judea will flee, and a 1260-year period will follow. Immediately after this 1260-year period, the stars will fall, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and the elect will be gathered together. Now that we understand that the tribulation of the days started sometime after 685 CE, it becomes clear that the only things left on Jesus' timeline are the falling of the stars, the sign of the Son of Man appearing in heaven, and the gathering of the elect. In other words, the only thing left to occur is the asteroid impact and the rescue. But Daniel chapter 9 is very important. It adds to the events in Matthew 24. It says a commandment will go forth to restore Jerusalem, and 70 Shabuah after that commandment will mark the end of sins. That means all evil, including the final time of trouble explained in Daniel 12, will be completed 70 Shabuah after the commandment to restore Jerusalem goes forth. What's more, Daniel 9 tells us Messiah will show up both 7 Shabuah and 62 Shabuah after that commandment goes forth. And after the 62 Shabuah, he will cut or confirm a covenant for 1 Shabuah, and in the midst of that 1 Shabuah, the desolation will occur. Daniel 9 cannot refer to the abomination of desolation that occurred in 685 because it clearly says there will be no more sins shortly after it. Jesus actually clarified this conundrum when he told us there will be 3 watches. The first watch is described in Luke 21, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies. That was the siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE. The second watch is described in Mark 13, when you see the abomination of desolation stand where it ought not. That occurred in 685 CE, when the Dome of the Rock stood on the Jerusalem Temple Mount. Those were the first 2 watches, but there is a third watch. In Matthew 24, Jesus said the abomination of desolation will stand in the holy or sacred place, and Daniel 9 indicates this may occur in the midst of the 1 Shabuah that starts at the confirming of a covenant, which must occur 62 Shabuah after the commandment goes forth to restore Jerusalem. And this covenant must be confirmed by the one called Messiah. Notice Daniel never said we were looking for the Son of Man or the Son of God. Instead, he used the word Mashiach or Messiah, and everything in his book is code. Contrary to popular belief, the abomination of desolation does not refer to a person. Instead, it refers to an idol. Jesus told us to look for the abomination of desolation that Daniel talked about, and the word for abomination in the book of Daniel means idol. Also notice Jesus did not say the idol would stand in the temple. We know he used the word for temple to describe the first event on his timeline, but why didn't he say the idol would be placed in a temple? Because the phrase sacred or holy place does not refer to a temple. It refers to a place that is sacred or venerated by people. Daniel was very specific that this idol would be placed 1290 days after the oath is taken. Which oath? The oath that Messiah took. Now back to the fig tree. We know it's Israel. Jesus said when Israel puts forth leaves in the springtime, the rest of the events on his timeline will occur within 1 generation. In other words, the asteroid impact and the rescue, he said, will occur within 1 generation of the year Israel puts forth leaves in the springtime. Daniel indicated we are also looking for the commandment to restore Jerusalem. Many Christians believe this commandment occurred in November 1947 when the UN voted to create the nation of Israel. This commandment did not go forth until the spring of 1948, when the country of Israel was officially declared. Barack Obama was the man the world called Messiah in 2009. 7 Shabuah after the going forth of the commandment to restore in 1948, Obama was born. And 62 Shabuah after, Obama won the Peace Prize for confirming the UN Worldwide Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. 1290 days after he took the oath of office in 2009, the steel beam that he signed was placed in the One World Trade Center. This was the idol of terror Daniel mentioned that was set up in the sacred place 1290 days after Messiah took the oath. This occurred right in the middle of the one Shabuah, the 7-year period in Daniel 9 that started in 2009. But that abomination of desolation must also be accompanied by the sign described in Revelation 12, the exact same celestial configuration in the sky that occurred in 686 CE, while the Dome of the Rock was being built on the Jerusalem Temple Mount, also occurred in the sky in 2012, 1 month after the two fulfillments of Daniel 12:11 and Daniel 12:12. We appear to be nearing the end of that one Shabuah in Daniel 9. We're told the desolation will occur by a flood in the midst of that 7-year period. That flood seems to refer to the millstone that we're told will hit the sea in the book of Revelation, the giant millstone that will destroy Babylon when Jeremiah says Babylon will be destroyed by the waves. Jeremiah tells us that will occur after a 70-year period. However, that 70 years is not the same as the 70 Shabuah in Daniel 9. The 70 Shabuah, we're told, mark the end of sins. The 70 years in Jeremiah end at the desolation of Babylon, which we're told in Revelation starts the final time of trouble, which is 42 months or 3.5 years. In other words, the desolation of Babylon must occur at least 3.5 years before the end of the 70th Shabuah. We know the word Shabuah means 3 things, +7, ×7, or the Feast of Shavuot. So the prophesied end of sins can occur any time between 2018 and 2024 according to these fulfillments, and the final 42 months would have to start at the very latest by the year 2021. That means the prophesied asteroid can occur any time between now and the year 2021. I originally thought 2024 was the cutoff for the meteorite, but I realize now that can't be because 2024 is the cutoff for the end of the 70 Shabuah, which mark the end of sins. Now back to the fig tree. We're told Israel will sprout forth leaves in the springtime. The country of Israel was declared a nation in the spring of 1948 after the commandment was put forth in November 1947. Jesus said 1 generation will not pass before everything in verses 1 through 31 have occurred, and that includes the stars falling and the rescue. But the 1 generation cannot be equal to the 70 Shabuah mentioned in Daniel, because we're told the stars fall at the end of the 1260 years and at the beginning of the 42 months. The 70 Shabuah mark the end of sins altogether, which means the 42 months of trouble must occur before the 70 Shabuahs end. Therefore, it seems the 1 generation in the book of Matthew must refer not to the 70 Shabuah in Daniel, but to a different length of time. In chapter 1 of the book of Matthew, the same book we're given the generation riddle, we are told there were 14 generations between Abraham and King David, and we were also given 2 more time periods. When we calculate those exact years according to the Bible, we end up with 941 years divided by 14 generations, which gives us 67.21 years in 1 generation. This is the maximum length of a generation in the book of Matthew itself. So when Jesus says in chapter 24 that 1 generation will not pass, he still may have been referring to 67.21 years, because although the .21 number of days since Israel sprout forth leaves in the spring of 1948 has passed, we're still in the .21 months. Right after Jesus told us the riddle of the fig tree, he said, "You will not know the day. In other words, don't calculate the 0.21 of the final year down to the day or the hour. That means 67.21 years and months from the spring of 1948 marks the end of one generation from the going forth of the commandment in the spring of 1948. So the spring of 1958 was 10 years after Israel became a nation. The spring of 1968 was 20 years, 1978 was 30 years, 1988 was 40 years, 1998 was 50 years, 2008 was 60 years, and the spring of 2015 marked the end of the 67th year. That means the last day of spring on June 20th, 2015, was exactly 67 completed years from the budding of Israel in the spring of 1948. But Jesus told us not to count the days or the hours. So the entire month of June in 2015 marked the end of the 67 years from the budding of Israel. But the length of the generation is 67.21 years. 0.21 times 12 months in a year equals 2.52 months. That means 2.5 months from June 2015 marks the end of the generation in the book of Matthew. 1 month after June is July, 2 months after is August, and 2.5 months after June 2015 lands in September 2015. Jesus said, "Do not count the days or the hours. You will not know the day or the hour." 67.21 years is the maximum length of a generation in the book of Matthew. Jesus said the asteroid and rescue will occur before it passes. We are in the midst of Daniel's week right now. The abomination of desolation occurred 3 years ago on August 2nd, 2012. The 1335th day, the day the blessed were longing for, occurred on September 16th through the 18th, 2012, and the sign described in Revelation 12 that we're told should accompany the abomination of desolation occurred on the true biblical appointed sign of trumpets, October 16th, 2012. The delay Jesus mentioned appears to have occurred at the Feast of Trumpets in 2012, the day the blessed were longing for. We are now reaching the 3-year mark from those events this month in September and also in October. The rising, we are told, will occur in the 3rd day. Days also represent years. In other words, the rising, we are told, will occur in the 3rd year. We are told it will occur on a day when the attackers are not looking for their Lord. Although there are many nice people who believe it will happen on a feast day, there are also many hateful people who expect it on a feast day. So Jesus was clear it will not occur on a day they expect, but instead a day they are not looking for it. Therefore, it will not occur on the Feast of Trumpets standard calendar, and most likely not on the popularized feast days or the eclipses, but it could be any other day. The entire month of September in 2015 marks the end of one generation as it's explained in Matthew chapter 1 from the spring of 1948 when Israel became a nation. Whether that refers to the statement in Matthew 24 about the fig tree remains to be seen. For more information, please watch the playlist Bible's Countdown to the Asteroid.